Okay. Do I need to be speaking in a mic as well? Yeah. All right. So thank you and welcome. My name is Thomas. I'll be explaining to you a little bit what we do at Euronews in terms of immersive journalism, and then I'll focus on a case study that we've recently finishing on the French election. Sorry. So a little bit about me. I've been working at Euronews for the last 5 years. Um, don't have a video background. I'm more like digital and print, but I've leading the 360 workflow for for over a year now, and I'm filmed, I've produced videos, I've trained colleagues and at other companies as well. I'm a speaker, but I'm also an ambassador for Journalism 360, which is an ONA Knight Foundation and Google News Lab initiative, which we are both ambassador for, and it's a very interesting set of resource for people who want to get into the business. So this is your news. Our new building we moved in September 2015 probably was destiny that looked kind of like a Google Cardboard. So that's not the reason why we got into VR though. In detail, we broadcast on air and online in 12 languages. We have over 300 journalists, bureaus, a couple places in Europe, and we have a sister channel in Africa. I want to take you back to December 2015 when we applied to the DNI, the first one of the DNI fund, which is the Google Digital News Initiative. With this project, we wanted to differentiate ourselves from what was being done at the time, so over 18 months ago, in terms of 360 News, which was big projects, expensive, several months to produce and publish. And we wanted to see if we can do faster turnaround, regular publishing of 360 videos, and including our teams, including our journalists, including our video editors in the project. We got the answer. We got some of the money we asked for, and since then I've been leading the project. Of course, this doesn't happen overnight. Publishing 360 videos in a large company, almost you could almost say it's a legacy media. Several challenges in terms of innovation. So how do you um, introduce immersive media in a news environment during a period of change inside the media because we changed ownership. We used to be a public broadcaster funded, but now we have a private majority shareholder. And of course, the general industry is also going on a lot of changes. And how do you convince top management uh, going such a niche and emerging product 18 months ago? How do you build your audience? Of course, how do you shoot 360 when you have zero VR or 360 experience? And of course, the key question, how do you make money out of it? So here are some of the solutions we found out. We worked in what was going on in the company through synergy. So with this new shareholder we had renewed digital ambitions. So of course, an innovative project like this was key in this for these new shareholders. We also changed the tagline. Our new tagline is All Views. Our news wants to be a platform where a lot of perspective are represented, not just one point of view. So 360 video literally and figuratively allows a multitude of perspective on an event. So that was also a good synergy. And our very factual editorial line was strengthened by this medium as well because it's very demediated in a way because you give the audience a lot more choice in what they can see. Of course, implementing a new workflow and developing a new workflow in a big company, I have to talk to a lot of people, do a lot of evangelization. Some trainings with beginning with external trainers, then we took on and we train over 50%, 50%, sorry, in the company now from journalists, producers, video editors who were before working both on editor on the website and on the TV side. It's important to take the time to experiment, which means also the time to fail and to learn from your failure. That's key. And now we can brief a journalist before he or she goes to shoot in 360 in about 45 minutes. We boil down the training. We use this at camera actually, but I'll talk a bit more about um, later. We can train them in 45 minutes on the do's and don'ts of shooting 360 for news. I mentioned the workflow. So we are the first international media with a fully integrated 360 workflow, at least in Europe. We didn't build a VR team. We didn't have a dedicated team. Eh, the skills and the knowledge are spread out throughout the company, and you can see on the right, no, your left, sorry, all the floors bring something to the workflow. And now, almost a year in, with the scale of it, the multilingualism, because we do publish several of our videos in all the languages that Euronews broadcast and publish in, and the scale and the periodicity, because we try to do two a week. We are one of the leading VR journalism producers in Europe. How do you build your audience? Well, we wanted to go where our audience already was, which is our website, a mobile website, our apps, sorry. YouTube and Facebook are also key in the publishing strategy that we created. We didn't go the way of making a dedicated 360 app, unlike the New York Times, unlike some other companies, because for us, we have a more modest audience and more modest means. We didn't see the return, the ROI in terms of an app. We do upload though the videos on 360 specific platforms, Omnivert, which is an American platform, and Veer, which is Chinese, and it allows us to get into the Chinese market, which where Facebook and YouTube are less accessible. It's still a digital media, so it doesn't stop when the article or the video is online. You have a feedback loop to create with new metrics dedicated specific to 360 video, like this sort of heat map, which aren't exactly where the users are looking, but it's more where they're scrolling inside the sphere, inside the equirectangular video that's projected spherically. And that's very telling. At the beginning, we had big red spot in the middle, which would tell us that people would not look anywhere but in the middle. And progressively, and also depending on what's going on in the video, you get a more rainbow of colors, and you want to go for rainbow. It's important. How do you shoot 360? There's no perfect 360 camera yet, but there are some that are really good for journalism use, and depending also on what you want to do as a journalist project. The octagon that I've designed here, kind of for me, has all the criteria that you can be looking for in a camera. You will never get the perfect camera. Again, I emphasize that. But depending on what you want to do, high quality live, you want to be something that's easy to use on the ground and easy to learn. You're not going to choose the same camera. We've experimented with several systems, the GoPro, classical GoPro rig, cheap entry-level camera, and we settled for this Samsung Gear 360. We had a partnership with Samsung during the second semester of 2016, actually. And right now, when we send journalists on the ground, we have a lightweight toolkit, which is this camera, a very small smartphone to control it. So it's a high-end Samsung S7, S6 camera to control the phone to control the camera with an app, and a light tripod. And now we also have an audio recorder because the audio on the camera isn't that great, and we messed up a couple of shoots, and we won't do the same mistake again. Monetization, of course, that's key. We are supported by the GNI fund, but we understood this as seed money, and from the get-go, it was clear that we had to identify revenue streams, and we've been working on that in parallel to building our storytelling capacities. I mentioned the partnership with Samsung, so we had an exclusivity with the camera and co-branding on the thumbnail and on the patch, which is on the bottom of the camera, on the bottom of the video, sorry. Um, and for our sales and marketing teams, 360 Video is now a new product in their catalog when they pitch clients and prospects in terms of branded and sponsored content. So a year ago, they didn't have that. Now they have it. We're starting to sell a couple videos, and they are now systematically included in their package they're pitching to their clients. And I need to underline it, but it's important. Those partnership, whether it's Google, Samsung, or the rest, they don't have any. They don't intervene in our editorial content. There is still a strict separation of church and state. When it's a sponsored or branded content, it's different. But for news, we're very much independent. So in terms of results, you can see some of the videos we published from the fun extreme sport kind that works well. The middle pictures is in the Norwegian island of Svalbard. Sorry for my pronunciation. We visited the seat vault there. Of course, we shot at the jungle in Calais. The ski pictures is from ski safety on the slopes of the Alps because every year you still have people dying. So we followed a team of people making sure that there is no avalanche. Some figures. So we published over 100 360 video since July 2016. They were shot by 40 journalists, and 45% of those journalists were women. Important to think about that as well. We have to upload manually every file still on all the platforms that we use. So we counted, and it's over almost 1,500 manual uploads, and they gathered 9 million views, over 9 million views. That's strictly for the numbers. In terms of qualitative results, we also got a bit of a name for ourselves with the national, international press coverage. Excuse me. A little case study of you can innovate in terms of coverage for with a 360 camera, 360 immersive journalism. Sorry, we've decided to launch during the French election campaign a multi-episode series, working in collaboration with seven French media, yes, seven French media throughout France, including the overseas territory, to do immersive portraits of voters, of citizens, of people living in France ahead of the vote. Because it was such a crucial moment for France, we wanted to go in the people's home, learn what they had to talk about, what was on their mind, and using 360 to see how they were living, to understand better why they would think the way they thought. We didn't go for the very visual story. We went for the more important story, and we tried that way to push the boundary of the medium. Working with local media allowed us to avoid parachute journalism, which had been a very giant criticism of the British and the US press during their election campaign in 2016. We had the know-how to dub by journalists videos. So because the world was watching France during the election campaign, we had those videos available in English, German, and they have elections coming soon, Italian, Spanish, and Russian. So taking local voices, hyper-local voices to the global stage. The idea was, like I said, use spherical video to get outside the bubble, and with a show and not tell, show don't tell motto of the best literary journalists would not represent the scenes that we've shown in 360 as well as 360 can do. It was important for us to use this medium. You can see the map, like our little tour de France of 360 videos, including the overseas territory of Martinique, because that's still France, and their votes is worth my votes. So uh, it's important to include them as well. And so we had 9 episodes. The last episode, the 10th episode, is a VR environment that we're building with a German company called Fragments. We're partnering with them. They're Berlin-based. We're partnering with them to develop a tool called Fader. It's a web-based VR editor, and it's in beta version right now. You can check it out if you want. So it's one of my last slide. Just a little brief overview of all the places we've been to, from farmers in Brittany to the islands in the French Caribbean, the rough area around Paris, um, startup guy in Strasbourg, an employer of three, someone who had a castle. So we really strive for diversity of opinion, of places, of profiles, and of course, trying to have equality between the gender. To have 4 women and 5 men, also important for us. Got results. It was collaborative work. So a local journalist would work with a Euronews producer. You can see him on the picture. It was also for us interesting to introduce the 60 journalism in those local newsrooms, and we've uploaded 171 videos, and we reached over 1.5 million views with this project. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, I'm Jessica Loretti. I am the head of Riot Studio based in New York. Quick background on Riot. They started as a cause based startup media company in LA that spent a lot of time doing work around democratizing media, giving the tools of production to people around the world to tell their own stories that they would publish on their platform, as well as an initial mission to connect news to action. They got really interested in VR about 2 years ago and just saw incredible results with the format. And they were acquired by Huffington Post and AOL just a year ago. I started with them just a year ago, just right after they were acquired, and I was the head of editorial, running and kind of launched and led the 360 News team within the Huffington Post office. I'm going to start by just telling you a story. So my first day on this job, I had never made a VR film before. I had never worked in a proper newsroom before. My background's in documentary filmmaking. I worked at Vice Media for a long time. I also worked in progressive social issues at a social impact agency called Purpose, and was kind of walking into this opportunity as really excited to kind of learn about this new, what I saw as this intersection of tech and media. My first day on the job, I kind of thought that I was gonna like come in and like meet everybody and like learn a bunch of stuff before we kind of got started. But my first day was the day of the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting. So I distinctly remember walking in through Manhattan, walking into the Huffington Post newsroom, texting the news director, saying like, "Oh my god, like we have to do something. This seems like a really important story for us to be covering in 360." So kind of walk in. Everybody else is obviously like very busy with their reporting. All the other teams have everything planned. We had no idea what we were going to do. And I sent a producer. I just said, "Get in a cab, go to JFK, get on the next flight to Orlando. By the time you get down there, we'll tell you like where your hotel is and like what you should be doing, because we don't know yet." So kind of met with our first challenge of utilizing 360 in the newsroom is really like, how do you differentiate between what your team is doing and what all the other teams are doing? So, first kind of going through what all the written verticals had covered for their planning, with the short form video team had planned, which was like Google Docs and Google Docs of ideas of stories that they wanted to do, as well as what was the Facebook Live team doing. So the initial thought that the team came up with was, okay, I think for 360, what really makes sense here is we can do the candlelight vigil. We'll be in Orlando. It's like there's a lot of people there. Like, I think that'd be a good use of the format. First challenge was that's what the Facebook Live team was doing. So the news director was like, you can't do that." And we were kind of like, "What do you mean we can't do it? That's like our only idea. We don't have any other ideas of what to do." And she said, "Well, come up with something better." So then we were like, "Okay, what else can we do?" So then there was an idea around, well, what if we go to the events that are happening in New York? And there's going to be a bunch of people gathering. There's going to be a protest. There's some bands playing. There's some other things going on. We can interview some people and we'll put together kind of little report on what was happening there. Again, the news director was kind of like not it's not good enough. Like, come up with something better. And if you've seen this kind of stuff before, and I'm sure you have, and we've made tons of it, to be totally honest, um, it's really boring. Okay. So, like a 360 video of a bunch of people standing in the street is incredibly boring and is a terrible use of the format. I will say that. And so, kind of going back to the drawing board at some point in the middle of the day, I sat down with the team. I was like, "Guys, let's just like brainstorm about this. And like, we got to just like come up with something else." And we kind of had an insight in the middle of the day around just the sheer number of people who were lost in that tragedy. It was 49 people. And so we just thought like, wow, that's just like, it's a staggering number. It's a huge number. And we had this idea, what if we did something where we could visualize what 49 people look like? So I actually sent the LA team. They were like just going because they're all activists, so they were all going to the candlelight visual in West Hollywood. And I said, "Okay, go there. I want you to try this thing. I had no idea if it was going to work or not. I was like, grab 49 people, put them in a circle around the camera, and do something where you visualize what that looks like. So they went down to the event, they grabbed all these people, put them in a circle, had a very simple kind of direct address to camera that said, today we're at this vigil. 49 is more than just a number. Today it represents the people that we lost in this horrible tragedy. Take a look around you and think about what that means. So we get the footage back, and again, I had like no idea if it was going to work. I am from New York, so was incredibly cynical about VR and 360 and new immersive formats that everyone's, think are going to be so great. I had always kind of thought like, this is cool, but like, who cares, which I'm sure is what most of you are sitting here thinking when you are looking at me right now. And then we get this footage back from this particular event, and you start to look at it and you start to think about these people, and you start to think, wow, like these people had lives. They had moms, they had dads, they had dogs, hopes, dreams, desires, failures, kind of everything that makes up a life. And then you take the opportunity as the audience member to reflect on what that means. And so, in this way, you've created an experience for someone that lets them experience what it feels like to be at a candlelight vigil without literally being at the candlelight vigil. And this was my first kind of like aha moment with this format, because I really started to think like, wow, this is really powerful. It's like you sort of get choked up. The hair on your arms is kind of standing on edge. It's very moving, and really kind of hits you at the core. It was the first time where I was like, if we can figure out how to connect the narratives and the format into one, right? So like the format of itself was distinctly part of like how that worked conceptually. And if we can figure out how to do that, like I think we can do some really great work there. So I'll stop there, just as kind of an anecdote to set the stage of kind of what my experience has been here. And I'll kind of pass it back over to Thomas. Do you want to talk about kind of what are your early learnings? Like, what are the kind of like tips of the trade? If you have anything extra from your presentation that you want to share with people who are just getting started or just kind of curious about it. Oh, you have one.
Yeah, thank you. Um, Imagine you have to figure out three challenges. The first one is how do you shoot technically correct and nice looking video? Then you have to think about how do you make that a journalistic video? And then how do you tell a story inside of that video? And we took several weeks to figure out the first part. Then it took again a few tries to get the second part right. And then you have the third part that we're still working on because depending on the topic, depending on the shooting condition, you won't necessarily have the time to come up with the right material. And like it's video journalism, so if you're not there, you can't make it up after in post production. Um, so of course, for the for better audience experience, the video needs to be still. Like stabilization is key. Shakes movement really mess up the video. Even if you just watch it on your desktop or in Magic Window, which is when you hold your phone, which is how we admit most of our viewers watch the videos. We do we
How
are
many people here know what magic window means? Okay, a couple. So that's like if you see on your when you see a 360 video on Facebook on your phone and you can move your phone and you see 360, that's called a magic window because it's like magic. It like moves behind there.
yeah, it's a window
And
to
now they
perceive.
call normal video like fixed video or framed video
Let's see.
or flat. I haven't heard that one yet. But yeah, that's just like regular video.
Yeah. Um, the sound is incredibly important as well. Some people might just say it's half the immersion, but it is key, and especially when you're interviewing people, when you want to set the mood, the stage, or a scene. And we, as content producer, will obsess about a stitch line, which is when The cameras are assembled together, the different footage is assembled together, and oh yeah, someone is walking on the stitch line. It's horrible. But I don't think the audience care that much if what you're showing is interesting and important. So don't obsess over production details like that. You'll never get it right anywhere because the cameras are not perfect yet. And of course, I have to plug it, but Journalism 360 has a lot of great resources if you want to get into it.
Talk to Laura after.
Yes, she's right there. Um, but for real, it is much easier. Not only of the gear and the software gotten better and cheaper and more affordable and easier to use, but when we started a year ago, 18 months ago, there wasn't any tutorial, there wasn't any resources specifically targeting journalists, right? There was some on to how to stitch a video, but nothing on doing non-fiction, not scripted videos for news. And it's moving fast, and we are here at Facebook. They're a huge stake in the business. Google as well, Samsung as well. So you have to work with that, and yeah, it's interesting. And you at Riot focuses on stories that can have an impact, social impact, etc. Um, to what extent did that impact your choices of videos that you make?
Well, I think our editorial team is always, just we kind of have a different approach. We don't do like straight news. Really, our background is more in documentary filmmaking. So we have a couple kind of issues that are really core. Climate change is something that we cover quite a bit. Refugee crisis as well. And I think kind of coming from that cause-based background is where we saw a lot of success with VR and kind of first got into it in the first place. Um, I'll share also too. I have kind of like my 3 tips that I give to everyone. The first that I say is that while it's 360 video, it has nothing to do with video. So like you can't approach it in the same way that you would approach making a normal linear video because it's not the same. The creative process is completely different. I really kind of liken it more to UX design or immersive theater even. You don't, when you're making a film, you are not thinking about how the audience is going to participate in it 99% of the time. Maybe like one, you can find one example of something like that, but it's not generally how you're thinking of the narrative approach. And the biggest thing I think is really in the pre-production in this and really thinking about the blocking and how you're going to tell the story on that end. So that's the first thing, is to really just change the way that you think about that in terms of creative development of your projects. The second is to really remember that it's participatory. So your audience member is at the heart of the narrative. And this is the hardest thing, I think, for everyone. And we'll probably bring up some questions about ethics afterwards, which is that you are not in control and you have to let go of that. And you have to figure out a way to tell a story that is narratively engaging and kind of broad enough that a lot of different people can interact with it in their own way, yet sharp enough that communicates the thing that you are trying to say. That's not an easy thing to do. It's quite difficult, to be honest. The third thing too is that, to Thomas's point, it's like this is a completely new space. So people often ask me like, what is the opportunity that you see in working in VR? And really, what I think of it is kind of a more existential opportunity. You know, what if I could tell you that you could go back 100 years and be a part of the invention of cinema? That'd be pretty cool. Like we're literally at the point where every single project that comes out is reinventing, pushing the boundaries of storytelling, helping to define this space that is completely undefined. So there I see is kind of an exciting opportunity, but also is one of the biggest challenges, is that there's no rule book. And everybody just like wants a rule book. Like, give me the formula for a good 360 video. Well, the truth is, like, nobody knows what that is yet. Like, people are like every day, people are like changing it. Like, we have some ideas of what it is now, but every day with every new project and new piece of technology, as what how that advances, it continues to change.
Do we open it to
Yeah.
questions? Yeah, if you have
What kind of
questions in the
questions do you guys
room.
have? So many. Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Richard from AFP news agency. A couple of questions. The first one is the audio. You mentioned the audio. Um, have you worked out, or has it been worked out, how to do good 360 audio, or are you still marrying it afterwards, or how long will that take? Before we get that, the second thing is how where do you see this in like 5 or 10 years? I mean, do you see people like having headsets on the tube in London, being immersed in their 360 on their commute on the way to work? I mean, is this going to be like a gimmick that's a sort of a niche?
Like
And
3D TV.
yeah,
I'll start with the second question, where is this going in 5 years? I think that 360 video is a blip, a tiny, tiny blip in what will be a larger narrative around immersive experiences. I think the future is in interactivity and mixed reality. So I think you're seeing a lot of the beginnings of that. Has anyone here experienced the Microsoft HoloLens? It is one of the coolest things in the world. It is a computer that is on your head and it scans the room that you are in and puts holograms in it. It's dope. And then like it's really, really cool. They have this one of the demos that I saw was for Lowe's, and you can be in your kitchen and you can redesign your kitchen. Like, what would these cabinets look like? Why don't we paint the floor like this color? What about these appliances? And then you go like bleep, bleep, bloop, bleep, bloop, bleep, blop, and like order it all and it gets delivered to your house. Like that's really cool and is like something that people want. I mean, I think too, in terms of interactivity, gaming, I think the Hollywood movie industry has been really good in this space. If you saw the new Ghostbusters movie, which was pretty bad, but they had this interactive experience where you put on a backpack, a jetpack, and a VR headset, and you zap ghosts with your friends. So it's kind of like a VR laser tag experience, which is pretty cool. So those are the kinds of things that I think are going to be part of the future. Now, like, how do you use that for news and journalism? I think that's still kind of up to us to figure out. I often think about what if you could create an interactive experience around climate change or this crisis in Syria. Like, imagine if you could be walking down the street in Aleppo and you could see the devastation all around you and you could kick a rock and feel like what that rock feels like on your foot, like the pressure and tension of that. You could sit in a bombed out apartment. You could pick up a photo booth and look at a family's life and see a teddy bear that's, like destroyed. That to me is like when I think of like how news, documentary, media kind of space can use these new technologies and new ways to tell stories. I don't think it's going to like replace everything. I think it's one of the tools in the toolkit, right? And I think it's it should have the same attention of like, does this make more sense as an infographic or should we make this a video? Like, I think it's the same kind of creative and decision making process.
And for the sound question, it's difficult because not every platforms work the same way. Of course, there's no single standard yet. Um, but Facebook is a free tool that's pretty powerful. You can do double spatialization, which means whether you move your hand or your head or the phone, the changes. And if somebody is moving inside a video, it follows it as well. So it's clunky, but it's getting there. And yeah, the Facebook bought a company called Two Big Ears, I think 6 months ago, and that's an usable. I don't say I'm not saying scalable, but it's usable for journalists now, and you don't have to do build your own app with specialist sound inside of it. Another question. Yep. Oh,
Hi, I'm Lila Raptopoulos from the FT. You were saying that like every that things are moving so quickly that every new thing sort of pushes the boundaries and pushes the boundaries. I was wondering if you had any examples of things where you sort of felt a rule, you're like, oh, well, this is a rule for 360 video, and then something came and upended it, and then another thing came and upended it. Are there any examples of things that really felt uh, like they push things far?
I mean, I think people are just starting to get down, like, how do you do this on a with a regular cadence? Like, if you look at the first wave of 360 work, it's all nature. It's like we're in the Grand Canyon, like hang gliding through the Grand Canyon. It's like it kind of makes sense, right? Like beautiful epic nature, like spaces is what everybody was doing. And now I think what people are really trying to get down is like, how do we actually tell like a 3-minute news story that can be watched on Facebook using this format? And like now that's really starting to be like formatted almost.
And on a technical side, a couple years ago, you didn't have the plugins. It's a detail, but it's important. A plugin in After Effects that allows you to display flat title in a spherical video. If you just pasted text in a spherical video, once it was projected spherically, it would wrap the title. Now you have this set of plugins that are allow you to have a nice looking flat. It can be picture in picture as well, so that's also opens up cool opportunities. But yeah, um, evolving for better storytelling.
R. I'm sorry. You say VR 360,
Okay.
right?
Yep, I'm
So
ready for
you're
this
not
one.
expecting people. So yeah, there's there's a distinction, right?
Yes, yeah.
VR. Are We're really not expecting to shoot a 360 video and have everyone sit there with a headset on to view it,
Right.
right? Unless you have a Facebook app and a Samsung headset, and
Right.
yeah.
So this is a great question because it's actually a good time to level set. So when we say virtual reality and 360, what we mean is, and you dispute this if you define it a different way, but the way we define it is virtual reality is computer generated graphics. So it is computer generated environment in 360 degrees. 360 video is live action video based in reality in 360 degrees. Both of those things can be viewed on a mobile app, on a desktop, or in a headset. So that's one thing. So I would say for the most part, we aren't making virtual reality. We're making 360. We have been doing a lot of experiments with like what's the intersection of like live action and animation, and what does that look like, and how do you kind of play with it. But we don't really do like actual virtual reality. So that said, we do make stuff for the headset um, uh, that people would watch in that. I would say that the majority of the audience for this work is on Facebook currently. Like that's where we're getting the most of our views. So that's certainly what we're optimizing for. But we are making stuff and a lot of stuff that we do kind of more on the client side that is higher production value. A lot of the stuff that we're doing in the news editorial side is quick turn, right? Like you want a story that's going to be out in 24, 48, like a couple days. So it's a lot harder to use some of the other higher end cameras just because of the stitching time that it takes. There's other things on post that take a lot more consideration.
Yeah, and just on the VR 360 debate, I just try to call it whenever I can immersive journalism, and that works as well. It also works for audio, like 360 specialized radio program. For me, also falls into the category of immersive journalism.
Sure. Hi, I'm Laura Noonan, also from the FT. I'm a journalist there and I cover mainly corporate news. And I guess you've already said how it's evolved from nature to some kind of news stories. But do you see it mainly being useful in like human interest type news stories rather than kind of corporate news? Or is there a way to do corporate news in a 360 way?
I think it was the Wall Street Journal a few years ago who did a VR, so CGI experience, following the ups and downs of the Nasdaq, as if it was a roller coaster. I'm not saying that's going to be like the daily roller coaster of the Nasdaq and the Dow Jones and everything. But it was an interesting experiment, so to speak. We don't really do any corporate story or business story, but I don't see why not. As long as it's not a sit-down interview with the CDO or the CTO or whatever, talking about the quarterly results. Um, don't limit yourself. Is I think what I wanted to say. Not everything is worth doing in 360, but with the cognition thought process on what you want to do it, visually speaking, yeah, give it a shot.
Yeah, I would just add to it, I think there's like kind of three things that work. So one is like some kind of beautiful space and environment where you're gonna like want to look all around you. So inside is like not usually super interesting unless it's like a very beautiful architectural space. Then there's like the things that make you like feel like something. So like a roller coaster is a great example of that. Like so you feel like you're on a roller coaster when you're watching it in a headset. I think the third thing that we've seen less of, but is the kind of thing that I'm like most interested in is like, how do you create some kind of motion that moves around you that forces the audience member to participate in some way? Um, so, to that point of like, if you had something that was like moving and then it goes back this way and it makes the person move and be active in the story. So those are all more like kind of conceptual ways that you would approach that. But those are kind of the things that work for it.
Hi, my name is Kasper. I'm from TV2 Denmark, work with product. Jessica, coming back to your talked about this being just one of the tools in the toolkit. The way you present these things on HuffPost is it looks like it's almost just an angle. It's just a piece of content. How important do you think it is to say like this is like the format over the story? It seems like you're prioritizing actually the story. People might not even know that they're getting a 360. That's the one question. And the other question, you can watch this on HuffPost on platform. What are your like kind of choices and challenges around presenting this on platform versus off platform? I mean, Facebook and other places.
So the second question is like, what is the biggest challenge? I think that's just like educating people on what 360 is. I mean, I've had experiences where I'll be walking down the street in New York, run into a friend who works in media, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm like doing this VR thing now. And they're like, what's that? They like literally have no idea what I'm talking about. And that would be someone you'd expect to like kind of be aware of recent trends in the industry. So I think that's like one of the biggest hurdles. And then a lot of people discover 360 on their phone because like they're like staring at their feet and it like then it moves and they're like, whoa, what's this? And that's like the first time that they like even knew. So I think it's real like the education piece, but I think 2016 has been kind of like the year of education for 360 and a lot more people kind of know about it. What was the first question? Is it
It's
more
about
about the
like
format than
yeah,
the
it seems
story?
the way you present it on your site is just like it's a story like any other story. It's not like 360 or VR. It's just a story, and people get there, they might discover, oh, this is a VR story, and like how are you balancing that between the format? I mean, like gallery, video, 360, and then just like we're trying to tell a story.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that we got into this was like I think the first VR film they shot was in Nepal after the earthquake. And so it was really about this like how do we show people what this really looks like? And it just sort of opens it up in a way that linear video just can't really do. So, it really started from a way of like how do we present all angles. I think there's another angle for it to us, which is about that kind of democratization of media, which is like we're not hiding anything. I'm not standing behind the camera. There's not something on the edge of the frame over here that's being revealed to you. It's like this is what it is. This is what it looks like, and we're just showing you everything for you to decide kind of like how you feel about it. So those are the I'm not sure if that answered the question, but that's kind of how we think about it. We're at time, but I'm happy to stay and answer more questions. Thomas is too. Thank you.